Hello everyone, my name is Yulanda Chung. I work for the Institute for Energy Economics and Financial Analysis, IEFA. In August 2017, we launched a new report about capacity payments and how this mechanism to coal-fired power plants could lock Indonesia into a high-cost electricity future. Today, I'm going to give you a very short presentation. The report is called Overpaid and Underutilized, and that refers to the way we are buying and purchasing power from coal-fired power plants and how that power is going to be overpaid and underutilized in a few years' time. Let us look at what capacity payment actually is. Capacity payment is a part of the tariff. It's a payment paid by PLN to private sector developers. As long as the power plant is built, capacity to generate electricity is available, and regardless of whether the power generated is used and dispatched by PLN. And that payment is usually guaranteed for the whole duration of the power purchase agreement for about 25 years. So capacity payment is a part of the tariff, and it covers three main components. First, as a private sector developer or independent power producer, you may have gone to the bank to borrow money to build the power plant. And the capacity payment will allow the borrower, the independent power producer, IPP, to repay the bank both the principal and the interest of the loan in order to construct the plant. The second component of capacity payment is a return on the equity invested by the IPP. For example, if I were to invest in a power plant, a coal-fired power plant, and it costs $1 billion, I go to the bank and borrow $800 million, but I also put in $200 million of my own money as equity. I would like to earn a return on that equity as well, and the capacity payment would allow me to have a return on the $200 million of equity that I have put into the project. Finally, the third component of capacity payment is the fixed operation and maintenance costs. These will be costs that will be incurred regardless of whether the power is dispatched or used by consumers. For example, staffing costs will be a fixed operation and maintenance cost. Again, capacity payment in the previous regulatory regime usually is guaranteed for 25 years and up to 30 years for the entire duration of the power purchase agreement. But we will see with the latest regulation in Indonesia that tenor, the period that capacity payment would be guaranteed, could be shortened to 15 years. The report is called Overpriced and Underutilized, and that is because two developments in recent years will make coal-fired power plants overpriced and underutilized in the very near future. First, why is it overpriced? Renewable energy prices have become drastically cheaper. We know that in Indonesia, the levelized cost for electricity, the average cost for solar PV projects is about 17 cents per kilowatt hour in 2016. That's actually a very liberal estimate. We know that there are projects already achieving a lower cost per kilowatt hour. And IEFA has done the analysis knowing that solar will be competitive against coal-fired power by 2021. That's only 4 years away from when we are speaking now, 2017. So it's in the very near future we will see solar PV competitive against coal at around 8 US cents per kilowatt hour. Second, underutilized. IEFA has done the analysis based on Indonesian government data and know that for thermal steam plants using coal as the fuel, the utilization rate is only about 57%. The data is derived from the data in the Handbook of Energy and Economic Statistics of Indonesia 2016. We also know that from certain media reports, from the Financial Times for example, they have reported that coal-fired power plants dating from the fast-track program phase 1 and 2 are operating well below capacity as well, some of them running at just 30 to 45% of planned output. Now, this overestimation of electricity demand growth is not unique to Indonesia. We've seen the same thing happening in Japan, in China, and India. They are all hobbled by excess generation capacity expansion plans, and effectively it has resulted in immediate idling of new thermal power capacity. The end result is collapsing utilization rates of thermal power plants. In China is below 50% in 2016, and in India is below 60%. That is despite the fact that all these projects, when they first started, had projected to be used 70-80% of the time. We are going to see the same in Indonesia in the utilization rate for coal-fired power plants, suffering the same fate. And that is because of the first development, because renewables are getting cheaper, they're getting integrated into the energy mix more and more, and renewables are going to be cheaper. And PLN, being a logical purchaser of electricity, should always dispatch from a renewable plant rather than a coal-fired power plant. Also, the current power purchase agreements that we've seen for renewable energy projects, especially the ones that are PV and wind that are intermittent or variable, we have seen that all the PPAs are drawn on a must-run basis, up to 10 megawatt. What that means is PLN has guaranteed to these developers that as long as the sun is shining, the wind is blowing, and the plant is generating electricity, PLN is obligated to dispatch from these plants ahead of other baseload technologies such as coal-fired power plants. So that is why there is urgency to rethink how power is generated and paid for, because we will see in about 4 years' time renewables will be cheaper. But then Indonesia is locking itself into a guaranteed payment scheme basically for the next 25 years for some of these coal-fired power plants. So I even did some analysis to see how much does it cost to have coal power in the name of energy security. In the latest RUPTL, the proportion of additional coal-fired and mine-mouth power generation capacity allocated to IPP is about 24 gigawatt between 2017 and 2026. And PLN will be contracted to pay over 76 billion US dollars over the course of 25-year PPAs to secure access to this capacity. Let us turn to Java Bali for a moment, because it is where the demand is. Java Bali doesn't need any further large-scale coal-fired power projects. What it needs is incremental increase. Let's go into the details. If you refer back to the RUPTL, going ahead with the capacity increase for Java Bali would increase the reserve margin to 55% by 2019. PLN actually only aims to have a reserve margin of 25%. So you see the difference between 25%, the target, and 55%, the end result. There is quite a bit of buffer that is actually excessive. We also see that about 12.8 gigawatt of coal-fired power is allocated to IPPs for development between 2017 and 2016. If we were to take a very conservative estimate, based on the current coal-fired power utilization rate of 57%, and I assume 40% of the 12.8 gigawatt capacity will remain unused, Pillar N will still have to pay $16.2 billion for this unused capacity. And to be even more dramatic, even without a single IPP coal-fired power plant being built in Java, Bali from 2017 to 2026, the reserve margin will still be at or above 12%. Now 12%, of course, is below the target 25%. But in order to reach 25%, Java Bali doesn't need large-scale coal power projects. What it needs is cheap renewable energy projects situated where the demand is. And in Java Bali, solar PV is actually widely available from rooftop to utility scale projects. As we are preparing for the report launch, there is a new regulation to MR10 2017, and that affects the capacity payment mechanism as stipulated in the power purchase agreement. The capacity payment tenor in the previous regulatory regime is 25 to 30 years. So in our analysis, we take 25 years as the norm. And that would give project developers, the IPPs, an equity return of 12%. The capacity payment payout over the course of 25 years to secure access to the 24 gigawatt capacity would be about $76 billion, as we've mentioned before. Now, the latest regulatory change may cap the capacity payment tenor to only 15 years. If all things being equal, that would give IPPs an equity return, a guaranteed equity return of only 4%. And the capacity payment will be a lot less, to only about $53.9 billion for the 24 gigawatt. Now, we need to see a genuine rebalancing of risk between the IPPs and Pillar N. It will not be fair to coal-fired power project developers to earn an equity return of 4%. In fact, none of them would invest in any coal-fired power projects if the equity return is 4%. And we are likely to see negotiations between Pillar N and the developers on this key point. What we want Pillar N to do, and what would be important to implement this regulation correctly to their benefit, is for Pillar N to argue that the developers need to bear the risk of stranded assets. If developers of coal-fired power plants are confident that their plants are going to be competitive years into the future, 25 years into the future, then they do not have to worry that their plants won't be able to generate and dispatch power and earn revenue on the back of those power. However, if they are not as confident, then they would have to bear the risk that their electricity generated from their plant will not get dispatched because there are cheaper options available from renewable projects. Pillar N, if they can negotiate with developers in a way that would be fair to both parties, should tell developers to bear some of that risk so that their equity return is not guaranteed regardless of the price for coal-fired power projects. Conclusions. Coal power really will be overpriced and underutilized in the near future. We're not talking about the distant future. Pillar N can make changes today to secure an economical energy future. All things being equal, the new regulatory change will mean lower equity return for investors, increased risk for project developers because their return is no longer guaranteed, They may still earn close to what they were earning before, say 12%, but it will not be guaranteed. They will only hit their equity return target if they are actually able to dispatch electricity, sell their electricity to the grid. The new regulatory change would also lower stranded asset risk for Pillar N. In the past, Pillar N will have to bear stranded asset risk on its own because it's guaranteeing payment to the developers, regardless of whether they are using the electricity for the grid. The latest regulatory change would also mean more financial freedom for Pillar N to procure renewables. The end result is a better deal for consumers. If Pillar N's capacity payment mechanism were to continue for a long duration, say 25 years, Pillar N, as the only off-taker of electricity in the country, would actually be disincentivized to develop and procure more renewable energy. And that is because Pillar N would logically, as a consumer, not want to pay double. And that is why capacity payment, if it were to continue in the way it has, would lock Indonesia into a high-cost electricity future. Thank you for listening.